So after the insanely impressive round 1 victory against the Carlton Football Club, we know that the Richmond Tigers would end up going to Adelaide Oval for a round 2 contest against Port Adelaide, where the result was unfortunately just not the same, as in the Tigers got pretty much taught a lesson. They were beaten up in most facets of the game, especially in the midfield and disposal, and it obviously wasn't a good look. But the thing is, the fan reaction is very, very different. Most of the fans are kind of just sitting there and thinking, well, we knew this was going to happen with the very, very young list we of course had. And then there were some fans who were sitting there thinking, well, it just was not a good enough display from the, veteran type of players and senior guys in Jack Ross and Tim Turano and a couple others, which is also a totally fair call. Again, the Tigers were tipped by many not to even win a game this year, so to kind of lose how we did against Port Adelaide is not really a shock. But in saying that, I still think there were actually an insane amount of positives and, of course, an insane amount of negatives that we are going to be, of course, talking about today. Again, before we do get into that, if you are, haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do me a massive favor and leave a like on this video to let me know you guys enjoy it. Subscribe to the channel for the latest AFL content, Richmond content, all of the above. And I guess we'll get straight into it with some of the positives. And the first and foremost positive was our forward line. I actually think impressed. I think that out of everything that failed for the Tigers on the day, the forward line really wasn't one of them at all. And again, don't get me wrong, other than Port Adelaide's, some of their halfbacks and Alir, their backline is pretty bad. It's definitely one of the, I think, less good backlines, I want to say, in the AFL, and it just hasn't performed to what they tried to build it into. And with players like Dan Houston and whatnot leaving the team, it has created a couple of holes there in Port Adelaide. And, Zerk Thatcher that's been injured. Radaglia, of course, got moved up forward because he wasn't cutting it down back last season. A lot of different things. But the Tigers actually really impressed me down there, because the delivery throughout the day, it wasn't anywhere near as bad as what we saw from a lot of the times in last season, but it still wasn't that good and it still needs to be improved upon. But in saying that, the key forwards actually played really, really well. Specifically, I think they all had their different stretches, which you'd prefer them all being on at the same time. But Liam Fawcett was I think good in the first quarter, some parts of the second. Bauer was good in some parts of the second, some parts of the third. Armstrong legitimately wasn't seen the whole entire game until the third quarter came around, and he ended up becoming one of our better players for the day. There was definitely a lot going on there that worked out really well, and the small forwards like Campbell and Ryan Mansell, I think having 6 combined scoring shots actually was a really big positive thing. So the forward line gets a tick for the day. Again, some other things, the Clash Guernsey being changed. They got rid of the black sash on the back. Thank God, man. That looked absolutely terrible last year. That made me want to freaking rip my eyes out and shove them down the toilet. It just wasn't that good, and I'm glad they listened to the fans and changed it. But again, the other thing that I really, really liked was actually Adam Uze's coaching and the game style that he had. Again, in the preseason, you didn't see a game style at all. For the whole entire 2024 AFL season, there was no Adam Uze game style in sight. But in saying that, against Carlton, we obviously got to see what Uze's game style looks like, and it was a lot different to what everyone expected. Again, it was a contested midfield that would, of course, get it to the forward line, where we would have a bunch of small forward pressure players, very similar to the Damien Hardwick type era. But again, against Port Adelaide, even though we got completely smacked, there were actually a lot of positives about the ball movement and game style, in my opinion, where it actually looked really good. And I think in 3 to 5 years' time, it could turn out to be a game style that very much works in finals. The only issue is the fact that the Tigers were playing this game style, and that most of the times they were trying to do it, they would just mess up a disposal or mess up a kick, which comes with inexperience and youth that the Tigers have. And as Uze said in his, press conference after the game, the Tigers looked really young in the first half, which was true. They looked very young, very inexperienced, and you can tell that is going to happen throughout the season a lot. So that is not a big issue to me at all. And again, Uze doing a couple other different coaching changes, like, when Lukosius went down with an injury, Jacob Blight was no longer needed in the midfield. So he actually went in the ruck and played a pivotal role as well, going to the forward line and not only kicking a goal, but I think he had about 3 scoring shots. And even though his kicking looked kind of bad and he was pretty inaccurate, the reality is that he has never played forward or ruck at all from remembrance. Again, I think that was his first ever time playing the ruck, Uze said. So again, Blight is in a weird situation where if the team only has one predominant key forward, he's going to struggle a lot. And that was the issue against Carlton when he got, when he ended up getting subbed from that injury. He wasn't really needed anyway. And then against Port, when Lukosius went down. So they're going to have to figure that out. And I think the avenue maybe being the backup ruckman and, of course, maybe even going down forward when we need, which is great versatility for a guy who's only 5 or 6 games into his career. So very nice positive by Uze and the Tigers there. But again, there are some negatives, right? There are some negatives that are very much wrong with this team that is only going to be fixed with due time. And I think the first one is, the midfield is really bad. I have said this previously, that our midfield only plays well against midfields that it stacks up on and that are slow. So this could obviously mean the Carlton midfield, which is arguably the slowest in the game. Our midfield actually plays really well against them because we can use our contested ball and not worry about their speed. Again, we're going to play the Saints this week. I'm going to assume it's going to be good against the Saints. I think we stack up well there. We'd probably stack up against West Coast and Gold Coast that are a little bit slower. But other than that, it doesn't stack up well against any other team because there's just no variety in that midfield. Don't get me wrong, Uze can continue with this contested midfield game because it obviously works. It works very well for Melbourne and it worked, well in their premiership year. The only thing is, when Melbourne were winning these flags with this contested inside midfield that was, based on clearance players and whatnot, they also had players in there to diverse the team, like Cozzy Pickett going in and playing some midfield time. Neil Bullen was a big one. I think, Rivers plays in that midfield now as well. Brayshaw would go into that midfield a tiny bit as well. There was a lot of different variety in there that they would add with speed and, ball use, all of the above. But the Tigers right now have contested clearance player Tim Torreno, contested clearance player Jacob Hopper, contested clearance player Jack Ross, and Camden McIntosh, who is he's the outlier. He's the different guy. And McIntosh is a hard one because I saw 1 or 2 people calling for him to be dropped for the St Kilda game, which is crazy. Don't get me wrong, he didn't have a good game against Port Adelaide, but neither did a lot of guys. And the reason McIntosh didn't have a good game was because he didn't really have a role like he did against Carlton, where he was able to tag Cripps and play back up in the ruck. Again, for some reason, they didn't want to play him in the ruck this game. In the midfield, I don't even know if he was tagging, but the thing is, he's still quick, but he's not as quick as he used to be able to tag certain players like he, could have done back in the day, which he obviously didn't because he was a wing. But it's just McIntosh you still need in there for the experience. Again, when Josh Smiley eventually does play, he's a little bit different because I believe he'll be a better ball user than what Taranto and, Ross will be eventually, right? But the issue is that even though Smiley can go down and play forward, he's still a contested clearance player. So you do eventually need to add some speed and ball use in there, which they will against, again, Lawler will play more time in that midfield, and Lawler is actually a pretty quick guy and extremely good ball user. So he will get more and more time in that midfield, while you are going to see, I think, throughout the draft, even a player like Alex Rodriguez, or Freddie Rodriguez, sorry, who the Tigers are looking at, I think that's his name, looking at drafting potentially. Again, he's a very quick inside midfielder from Western Australia. And then there's a couple others like Dyson Sharp, who's quicker and a better ball user than what we technically have right now. So they can fix that. There's also, apparently the Tigers are really focusing on Ed Richards, who is a free agent, who I think might be a little bit old. He's going to be turning 26, and I don't know if that fits the time period of what the Tigers are looking at, but if you can bring him in, my God, the ball use and speed he will add, it will be off the charts, which we've seen what he can do already this season. So I could actually see them really trying to get Ed Richards and Rodriguez and maybe Dyson Sharp all in the one-off season to add much diversity to that midfield that really against Port Adelaide only looked like 4 players, and most teams like to float like 7 guys in every game. So that's that. Again, the back line is way too tall, which is true, but the reason it's too tall is because they obviously have the players going towards the end of their careers like Floston and Broad, who are still in there, while obviously drafting the younger guys to replace them for now, like Luke Traynor. So they're all kind of playing together. Again, that's fine. We're losing. It doesn't really matter that it's too tall. But again, in the next couple of years, you're going to want to change that. And we already have a Lewis Callaway, father-son halfback coming hopefully in this year's draft. He's a smaller player that will come into the team. Again, Nathan Broad did say on the radio station that he will look to retire at the end of 2026. So, again, you're a little bit shorter if you replace Broad with Callaway there, as well as, Floston eventually. He's only got 2 to 3 years probably left in him. I would say maybe even 3 to 4. He's a gun. So, you don't really want to think about Floston. You don't want to think about replacing him at all. You'd want to play him forever and ever. Amen. But, yeah, like if you were in a year or two to replace Broad with a smaller guy, that would stabilize it out a bit more. And maybe finding a halfback to come off the bench again. They tried that with Caleb Smith. I don't know if I really rate Caleb Smith that much, but we'll have to definitely wait and see on how that, of course, all does unfold. But again, if you haven't already, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for all the latest AFL content and news. Don't forget to comment your thoughts and opinions down below. And what do you guys think were the positives and negatives for Richmond against Port Adelaide? Again, I'd very much like to know. Subscribe to my gaming channel, which will be linked down below. Subscribe to this channel for all the latest sports content news. And I guess I'll be seeing you guys next time. Goodbye.